Thank you, everyone. So I've been slowly panicking in the audience that whole time because I was like, oh, everyone's got papered notes and that's great. And then the last session, you've got somebody dancing in front of you. So here I am, trying my best. This is not something I'm comfortable with, but I am in the weeds at the moment, leading a volunteer program. So hopefully some of the stuff that I talk about is actually useful to you. Now, when I lead a conversation about volunteering, reactions are hugely varied. And like me, there are a few people out there that love volunteering and cannot champion it enough. Then there are a wider group of people who don't know where to start but are in awe of the contribution that volunteering has in our community. Then some are concerned about volunteering because you have enough experience to know that it's bloody hard work, and that is the reality of it. And those who are fed up, exhausted and frustrated because the programs you're involved in have a small percentage of people doing the bulk of the work for the majority. This doesn't detract from the value or importance of volunteering in our community. Volunteering's value in Queensland was $84 billion in 2020, but this should challenge anyone who believes volunteering is easy, fun and free. Anyway, we'll get to that in a sec. In that, there's that lack of understanding of what it needs to happen to take a program from struggling to successful. Fun fact, and talking about pay your staff, that's so true. So when I was given my first paid opportunity to lead a volunteer program, I convinced the team to actually find the resources to, or the budget to fund 3 part-timers instead, because we weren't ready as an organisation. Me, someone who loves and is ecstatic about volunteering, who was panicking while talking in front of 100+ people today, and I love it, but honestly, it's hard work. I was too green and under-resourced. So I also didn't have people openly discussing volunteering or sharing their learnings with me. The doers tend to be terrified of public speaking, like myself. And hi, I'm Tarah and I'm terrified, but here we are. So I'm here today and hope by the end of my 20-ish minutes, I give a little clarity around volunteering, giving you enough tools so you'll come away being a concerned blackberry rather than a frustrated raspberry at the very least. Volunteering is the gift of time without financial incentives. The process of leading a volunteer program is frequently called the volunteer cycle. I prefer the term journey because it is meandering, there's lots of forks in the road, it's hard work. Many believe this journey starts with recruitment, and much of the attention is dedicated to this and the resources. And I've gone backwards, not forwards, great. But actually, the journey really starts with engagement and retention. And that's because most of our grassroots organisations, sporting clubs, health groups, charities and not-for-profits were started by a small group of volunteers passionate about a particular sport, pastime or social justice issue. In those early days, you're trying to engage each other enough so everything keeps running until you get big enough and need more people, and then that's when you actually recruit. At Foodbank, I actually spend almost no time recruiting volunteers, which is probably a great shock to all of you in the audience. Our program is so well respected now, and many potential volunteers hear about the program through word of mouth, through their friends and family. I often need to go through 18 to 20 unsolicited applications per week. People come to us because we've spent the time developing a program that thanks volunteers like donors, loves them like family and manages them like staff. And we operate on the basis that time is the greatest gift, as it's the only gift you give that you cannot get back. I'm also on the board of a tiny grassroots arts organisation, and after spending my time getting the basics right, we actually now have volunteers coming to us. It's taken 2 years, but we definitely have volunteers coming to us. So what does thanking them like donors actually mean? It means creating a reward and recognition program. Your potential program could include a variation of certificates of appreciation, morning teas, gift cards, handwritten cards, notes, personal and group positive feedback. The thing to remember is it's important to thank people how they'd like to be appreciated, and so that it doesn't unnecessarily take up their time. The image you see, I'll go back again, sorry. The image you see on the slide is actually from Foodbank Queensland's tea room during National Volunteer Week. We hosted a small afternoon tea and morning tea for the first 2 weeks in May to capture as many volunteers to thank them during their regular shifts. They weren't coming to a special event, they were just thanked every single time they came through the door. This is more impactful than a single event because it didn't cost us any more. However, I do feel my years in the arts with almost $0 budgets have made me the most resourceful event planner out there. The other thing to know is volunteers don't care about your organisation. And before you all get up and leave the room, what I'm trying to say is potential volunteers can care about your purpose, and then they might start caring about you if you're good to them, right? So we look after them, so then they start caring about the organisation and then they start digging deeper. For Foodbank, that's fighting hunger by sourcing food for those in need. It's really interesting sitting in a conference here today when the majority of my work is all around getting a kid a meal tonight. So this could mean they want to volunteer for other organisations doing similar things. So when we thank our volunteers, we don't just thank them for being food bank volunteers, because that's not important, right? We thank them for supporting us in fighting hunger, and I cannot stress that enough. Every single communication that I send out talks about this. And when we specifically acknowledge how their volunteer role directly contributes to the wider purpose of the organisation. For those in fundraising, this will be a familiar concept, hence why I call it thanking them like donors. Volunteer managers then need to go a step further by loving them like family. Everyone yearns to feel seen in a way that matters to us. All too often we thank volunteers like it's a one-size-fits-all. This could be giving them media opportunities, and could be inviting them to an award and giving them an award at an event like this. But only a select few will put their name forward because they believe everyone contributes. It's a team effort. So how do you know the best way to thank them? Well, you talk to them, get to know them, invite them to the right volunteers to speak for media opportunities or accept awards when necessary. These rewards still have a place, but only for the right people at the right time. Remember, you're not trying to cause people discomfort, you're trying to thank them. At Foodbank, one volley, and this is mint sliced biscuits, so it's not a healthy treat, but I'll try my best. So I ensure this particular volley loves mint slice. So I ensure in the tea room every Wednesday there's mint sliced biscuits in there. I never make a big deal out of it, but you can tell they notice and they really appreciate it. We've also had some volleys who've actually had to leave our organisation due to sickness or illness. So we send them flowers, get well cards from the team, or gifts to acknowledge that we still see them even though they're not physically volunteering with us. Calling workplaces families is a very contentious issue because the two should remain separate. I also wouldn't wish the family that I grew up with on anyone. However, that's not a joke, that's real. Sorry. Although my current family, my children, they're wonderful, but I also wouldn't wish them on anyone. Actually, talking about Tuckshop as like a necessity, I use Tuckshop every single day. Anyway, get back to the point. However, loving them like family is more about those informal chats you'd more likely have with a friend or family member than a colleague. Giving flowers to your mum on Mother's Day, or spending an hour chatting over a cuppa. These informal chats are also a great way to get real feedback about what's working and what's not, and I cannot stress enough that you please respond to this feedback and make amends where possible. Your volunteers are your experts of your program. And I also found Brene Brown in my darkest moments, but her research statement that we are hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives us purpose and meaning in our lives, and without it, there is suffering. This is so true in the volunteering sector. So many people gift their time because they want to feel a connection. If you don't treat them like you want them to connect with you, they won't come back. It's interesting to see how much people will dig deeper and when they're inspired by compassion and connection rather than shame. I've been asked to help at my daughter's school with this sentiment, why don't you do more and care more for our school? And when I've helped, I've felt very much on the outer by those who have dedicated more care like it's a competition. I now opt out immediately. Imagine that, somebody who manages volunteer programs chooses not to volunteer at her daughter's school. I also don't fear being perceived differently by others, so shame will never work on me. Rather, I choose not to compete because life is too short anyway. Instead, at Foodbank, we love our volunteers while asking them to gift us more time. I recently needed volunteers to redate frozen products. It's an awful task, it's messy, it gets all over you, but they still come and they still gift their time. I started asking, does anyone have a few more hours to spare and help us redate some frozen products in the coming weeks? I then followed up with that this need was urgent and that if our current volunteers could gift a little more time in May. I then outlined the commitment that it would be 2 to 3 hours on a Wednesday, Thursday or Friday. I concluded that redating products enables us to meet food handling standards and provides a greater protein offering to those Queenslanders in need. Remember what I said before? Always bring it back to the purpose. You see how I flipped that script from shame, you're not giving us enough time, to please help, it's urgent and you matter. I'm naturally a pretty cringe person, much to my eldest daughter's dismay, so I don't mind getting to know people. If you aren't comfortable doing this, find someone who is and work with them to build a culture of compassion and noticing the little things that matter. Remember, every workplace and volunteer organisation has a culture. It might just not be a positive one. Now we get to manage them like staff, the last but the hardest part of the volunteering journey trifecta. It can be difficult to establish rules when leading volunteers. We thank them like donors, love them like family, but we must give them the right framework and the tools in their roles. No different to how we treat our paid staff. You'll see I've got 6 key steps to developing people and culture practices in your organisations. First, at the very minimum, I recommend you create a code of conduct, a short strategy, a charter, a volunteer plan. It doesn't matter what you call it. You need a framework so everyone knows how to contribute with the most impact. Volunteer managers can feel like they're the only ones that care and get resentful and burn out when no one else is helping. But how can others help when they don't know what to do? Now, the image on the screen is from an event we had at House Conspiracy. Strange name, but it's the tiny arts org that I'm on the board of that I mentioned at the start. House Conspiracy is a real awesome, diversity in action is the only way I can describe it. We have young people, people from the CALD community, neurodiverse people, and those from the LGBTIAQ+ community. We love the work we do. I don't love on a Saturday having to scrub the toilets for an event though, but that's the reality of this board role. We create a safe space for emerging artists to showcase their work, and sometimes for their first ever exhibition. We have no expectations but host some of the best arts events I've been to. And that's not a bias thing, that was the reason why I got involved in this organisation. When I started, there was no strategy and no code of conduct. This is great because we were a little edgy and thought we didn't need one, but it's hard work constantly putting out fires because people are trying their best and stepping on each other's toes. Second, I touched on this before, ask volunteers for their feedback and listen, or at least explain why something can't happen in a way that they understand, right? Because we can't always just bend over backwards for volunteers. Volunteers can be quite blunt, in my experience, with their feedback, but it's not personal. They're there for the cause, so passion is emotional, not logical. Third, recruit the right people for the right role. We don't hire people at Foodbank and expect them to know what to do. So why do we expect our volunteers to do the same? At Foodbank, we create position descriptions and match people to these roles. If they've got specialised skill set, we try and find a role that they will utilise. Fourth, it's the hardest. It's why I put it in the middle. It's a compliment sandwich, this whole slide. It's taken me a really long time to have these conversations with people. It takes a certain level of maturity to explain that it's not working without personalising the feedback, especially when they see it as such a passionate cause to themselves. My manager does this with me daily, and I've found the best job of my life at Foodbank. My curiosity is nurtured and strangeness is welcomed. Apparently I'm now a duck amongst the ducks rather than a duck amongst the chickens. There are so many places to volunteer out there. Just because you say no doesn't mean they won't flourish elsewhere. And remember, you can always refer them to Volunteering Queensland and they can find another volunteer position out there. So if you don't do this, you'll see your best volunteers leave because every time you avoid talking to this person, they'll need to adjust or do more to compensate. And that's the same with workforce teams, that is the same with volunteering, but it's so much more painful when you're taking time out of your life to gift it to, say, Foodbank Queensland. Fifth, understand the motivations for volunteering. They could be looking for social connection, making friends, developing social or English skills, developing technical skills, wanting to help because the cause has impacted them personally, having a greater sense of purpose, or doing it because they have friends who already volunteer on the team. This list isn't all-inclusive or exhaustive. One of our volunteers said, "I'd been looking for a charity to join for a while and couldn't decide on one. During the COVID pandemic, my employer gave us a list of charities we could volunteer for, and I chose Foodbank. When I was younger, I grew up in a household of poverty and domestic violence, and a food relief organisation helped us. At the time, I knew no better, but as I got older," sorry, I really love this person, "I was thankful that someone had helped us out. Quite often, they were the difference between whether we had a meal or not. They gift their time because they're personally compelled by the cause. Even though their employer has discontinued the program, they still volunteer with us and work around that 4-hour volunteer shift each week." And sixth, clear is kind. I'm going to pinch from Brene Brown again. Unclear is unkind. Yeah, it rings true. All any of us want to do is contribute and be made to feel welcomed. Volunteers want to do that too, and many of the audience probably volunteers yourselves and understand how frustrating it is when people don't communicate what they need of you or what they want. Have a roster, have a schedule. Although I think we're talking about rosters and schedules weren't great before, but that's all right. It's great in this context. For when people are meant to volunteer, we use a product called Better Impact at Foodbank, but I mean, Google Sheets is sufficient enough as a free alternative. No one's perfect, but we can certainly take the steps to ensure we learn from our mistakes and try our very best to do better next time. Talking about mistakes, I'm now going to dig into what is not great that I see out there. And when I say, please do not do these things, I'm not being a highly critical ogre. I'm telling you this because I've done it myself and know it doesn't work. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that you can learn from me today. For example, it won't work if you use the word desperate. Yet I see everyone using it, probably because your personal situation is so dire you desperately need the help. But no one is inspired by desperation, and it doesn't add a sense of urgency, which is often the intention of these ads. It tells people you're disorganised and will take anyone. Imagine how your current volunteers feel when you put out ads like this. They're the ones desperate enough to give their time to your cause. It's okay to say desperation when we talk about the cause. I mean, people in our community going hungry is dire, right? But to link desperation with gifting time simply devalues their volunteer contribution, and I'm less likely to scrub a toilet on a Saturday. Tell people clearly that what you expect them to do. Market research current paid job ads for something similar. There's also no need to put the word volunteer in your job title. It's like writing about hiring a casual sales assistant when the contract terms are casual. It doesn't make sense. The places you advertise your openings are on volunteer job boards, so don't waste your time. And then be vague. I don't even understand what help deliver community events, amazing people, incredible locations, and heaps of fun actually means. At Foodbank, our volunteer job listings have a job title, description, and a list of benefits like the Hunger Relief Donations Driver. Now, I'm talking about the Hunger Relief Donations Driver because it's our one role we can't fill. So if anyone can drive a truck, please approach me after today and I'll happily talk to you. Foodbank Queensland's, and I think I've already recruited something. Oh, no, that person's gone, but I did recruit them in the audience while we were talking. Foodbank Queensland's Hunger Relief Donations Driver are on the front line during driving Foodbank Queensland's purple truck throughout Brisbane Metro to pick up food donations from our smaller supply partners. Foodbank Queensland's donation drivers help us rescue food as much food as possible to feed Queenslanders in need and directly support our vision for a Queensland without hunger. Now, do you see what I did there? Within seconds, the person knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what the time commitment is, because then we also link the position description that has all the times that they might be required. So that concludes what it takes. Well, no, there's a lot more to this story, but what I can talk about here today without bombarding you. So that concludes what it takes to lead a program that thanks volunteers like donors, loves them like family, and manages them like staff. As I said, none of this is free and easy. but it's worth the payoff in my experience. At Foodbank, we have roughly 145 volunteers in our system and 20 volunteers on site daily, gifting their time. This saves us hundreds of thousands in staffing costs each year, and actually we couldn't operate without them. It's hard work and one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. It's an absolute privilege to lead their volunteer journey. At House Conspiracy, we've been a 100% volunteer-led organisation for the past 7 years. Over 300 artists have used the house as their first place where they've hosted their exhibitions and gone on to have incredibly successful careers. That's why I volunteer at that organisation. I've said they, them a lot today, yet I am a volunteer. Volunteering completely changed my life. I was broke, had a young family, trying to break into the arts, which is very competitive. If I hadn't volunteered at Abbey Art and Archaeology Museum in Caboolture, or Pine Rivers Heritage Museum in my late 20s, I wouldn't have got my first paid gig as a public programs coordinator, an inner office. And then it got into people and culture from there, because I just love people. I'd still be in retail, on a minimum wage, struggling to pay my bills, and probably seeking help from Foodbank Queensland. Hopefully all these anecdotal experiences, summations of my experience, have allowed you to understand what it takes to run a successful volunteer program, and you're no longer a frustrated raspberry and a concerned blackberry. And if you spent this whole time thinking, I'm unsure what this chick's going on about and whether she even knows what she's talking about, please know that it was one of our volunteers at Foodbank Queensland that approached the team responsible for today and asked me to speak about volunteering. And I don't believe there's a greater form of appreciation and validation than that. So thank you. And if you please have any more questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Have we got enough time?
We've got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
What a superstar, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute superstar. And for someone who's not comfortable standing on a stage, you were just magnificent.
See my watch, it keeps going, oh, you're having a great exercise. And I'm like, no, I'm not. My heart rate's literally through the roof.
So your heart is definitely racing. Tarah, you are magnificent. Thank you so much. That was so insightful. I know you all really enjoyed it. I'm sitting over to the side. Lots of people doing this. Yes.
Fantastic.
Would we like to take some quick questions from the floor, folks? We'd love you to pick her brain just a bit more. Please. Tarah, I'm wondering about, we've all got those volunteers, the ones who mean well, and they do everything, but they just put everyone offside.
You have to talk to them. It's the only way. Honestly, I've had quite a few volunteers, and Foodbank's had quite a few of those kinds of volunteers. They love the cause, but everything they do actually has a negative impact on the rest of the team. And you have to talk to them. Talk to them first about what their situation is. So they might have, I have anxiety, so I struggle when I was younger to talk in big crowds like this. I still struggle today. But they might be struggling to come to their volunteer shift, and it's their only social outlet. So talk to them, see for the reason why they're struggling. There's plenty of resources out there that enable you to be able to lead a volunteer program and have those discussions. And then if they're just a horrid human being, move them on. No, but it's honestly, that's the reality, because like I said before, your best performing volunteers will move on if you keep your worst performing volunteers. And that comes back to that managing them like staff, right? And it's the kindest, most compassionate thing you can do for your whole team. Being nice in that situation is not great, but sometimes it's the first time they've ever heard that feedback in their life, right? So because I come from people and culture, I'm going to say it this way, find examples, talk to them about those examples and why they've reacted in that way. Then go, well, this doesn't really align with our values, so can you explain to me why you're doing it anyway? Give them an opportunity to basically do better next time, and if they're still not doing better next time, find them another organisation or tell them that they're no longer welcome. And that's harsh, but it's the reality. Yeah.
And it is hard, but detrimental if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely, because then you're not creating a culture of compassion and kindness, you're creating the opposite. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone?
Hello there. First of all, I'd like to say you're just brilliant and I just love you. I could just sit and talk to you forever. Just thinking about this at the moment and through COVID, things got really, really tough for you guys, and I can remember that. And you lost your volunteers, then people got sick, and then people were home, and then all of those things. Where is it at now? Is it better? Is it better than before? Is it almost there?
It was actually better through COVID, just to let you all know. Now, the reason why is because we were an organisation that was considered a essential service, so we could have volunteers the entire way through. So you had people at home, and actually that person that I spoke about who was so inspired to volunteer for Foodbank because they'd grown up in a domestic violence situation, they'd actually started volunteering through a program for their work because they weren't working. So then the work was enabling them to come into an essential service and give their time, right? It is so much harder now because a lot of people are going on holidays and people are travelling, people are getting sick. We've had quite a few illnesses on our team this year, which has been, like I'm talking like diagnosis, where they probably won't come back, which is really, it's sad. It's genuinely sad. And like I get upset about it, but I still go home and I'm okay at night. That's the one thing to remember too when you're dealing with this. It's still really hard. And it's hard for an organisation as big as Foodbank that has good market share that people are aware of. So I can't imagine what it's like in Tuckshops. I've never stepped foot in a Tuckshop to volunteer my time, and that's just the reality of it. And it's for those reasons that I talked about before. I've been made to feel like I'm a leper because I'm standing there and I haven't gifted enough time or haven't had enough time to contribute more.
So just on that point, can I ask you, what's the one thing that we can possibly do to make a difference for you?
I think you need to acknowledge people better and talk to your current volunteer teams and have real chats to them, and encourage that trifecta, right? But your whole volunteer team has to be doing that. So all of your volunteer team needs to be thanking each other like donors. All your volunteer team needs to be loving each other like family. All your volunteer team needs to be managing each other like their staff. And I guess if you can start doing that, then that's great. You also need a plan. If I go, I've done school fates, and actually one of those slides, well, not what to do, was from my daughter's school, and it said desperate. I gift very little of my time to the school fate. Because I don't know what I'm doing, right? So the person who's the stall convener, and sometimes you're a volunteer, so this is hard work. I tend to swear a lot, so I'm trying really hard not to go there today. I'm proper from the country, very bogan. Anyway, you have to explain to people what they're going to be doing, make them feel confident so they want to come into the building for starters, right? Give them the proper training. But the best thing you can do is start with a plan. Step one, if you can see your first step, try there. What are each of your volunteers doing, and what's the plan that you have for them each day? And communicate that to them before they arrive, is the only thing I can say. It's a lot more work. Like I said, this gig is not free and it's not easy, and anyone who thinks that doesn't actually value your time. Yeah. Hopefully I haven't waffled on too much and that was helpful. Anyway, thank you.